Cowan, who's going to talk to us on the changing geospatial landscape. And I hope you welcome my friend, colleague, and Mr. South Carolina GIS, Dave Cowan.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be invited back to the department. It's been 10 years since I left. And it's great to see this opportunity to talk about the field that I love so much, and to take the opportunity to see how we can expand that and keep abreast of what's going on kind of nationally and internationally. So this presentation, let's see, is, I call it the Changing Geospatial Landscape. The origins of that was a report that I was asked to write by the National Geospatial Advisory Committee. This is the highest committee in the country in terms of GIS policy. And we needed a document that would explain to congressional staff people what GIS was all about. And so I was tasked with this. I was actually tasked by the first chair of what we call NGAC, who was Ann Miglorisi, a graduate of our program. And then I followed her as chair of the department. So we also sort of had it in the bylaws that they had to be the chair of NGAC was a person from our department. Okay, so let me show you what I want to do. I want to take a few minutes to talk about personal perspectives. This represents my 50th year doing this stuff. Literally 50 years, half a century. So I'm going to give you some highlights of that, sort of to tell you about the evolution of the field, because I've been involved since the very beginning. I want to talk about evolution in the current situation. I want to talk about some things that I just didn't expect to happen. So as a retired guy, I get up in the morning and see what's going on. Fortunately, I have some consulting work, so it forces me to look, and perhaps I'm going to give you some ideas about some things you hadn't thought about. I want to talk about ArcGIS Online. I want to talk about Living Atlas. I want to talk about story maps, because that's been a large part of my life in the last year. And then maybe conclude with what does that all mean. So here we go, 50 years of GIS. So in 1968, as a graduate student at Ohio State, I was completing my dissertation, or I was working on my dissertation. I had to develop my own GIS. I wrote Fortran code. I generated CalComp plot routines. The output was a box of cards. I had to take my own pens to a plotter. You had to reserve space on the plotter on Monday morning, so it was awful. And actually during that situation, as I had accepted the job here in 1970, that was, when Kent State was involved, and Ohio State closed its, we had our own tear gas and a closing down of the computer center. So anyway, the bottom line was I generated a GIS because I needed it. It was a means to an end. Okay, I was studying the changing pattern of industry in Columbus, Ohio. And so I built the GIS. Nobody called it a GIS, but so it's one of the first GISs in the world. I came here, and probably 5 years after I came here in 1970, it took 5 years before I had the technology here to do what I was doing in Ohio State. So we did a variety of different things. There's some early 70s GIS stuff there. The map on the right, the color one, in order to get color output, I generated a computer tape, sent it to General Electric in Greenbelt, Maryland, and they produced a slide from it. There, it's Anderson County. That's one of the first, one of the very first. It's interesting that we're here in the Hollings Library, okay? Because Senator Hollings in the late 70s said we ought to have a coastal zone management program. We ought to inventory the coastal resources. And so what you see in front of you, the map in the middle is part of the Charleston coastline. Interesting thing, when you figure out that you generate polygons of different types of land use. And some of you are familiar with the US GIS or Land Use and Land Cover program. We were the only place in the country. We loaded the software here. We generated the output for this. We had a huge plotter to actually plot that stuff, but it was all because Senator Hollings cared about the coast of South Carolina. So we did this out of necessity, and we needed some analytical capabilities as well, not just producing this. I gotta move fast. I was thinking about this talk. It could be an hour, it could be a day, it could be a semester. Could easily be a semester thing. But anyway, we got to a point where we said we want some analytical capabilities, not just maps. And so we looked around. I toured the country. What happens? Who's doing anything? We found this company in Redlands, California, and we became Esri customer number 7. And we did a pilot project. So we installed their software. We're talking IBM 360 mainframe stuff, right? We bought the software, licensed the software, and we did a project, and we covered Esri's payroll for 2 weeks. There's now 10,000 employees. So anyway, let's move on. Another thing that we got involved in was a thing called DIS, Domestic Information Display System. Jimmy Carter was president. His son was a geographer, actually. And he went out to Greenbelt, Maryland, or to the Goddard Space Center and said, can you guys generate some maps from the census data? And what it says there, in 1980, GIS was rocket science. Okay? That guy is a rocket scientist, generating color choropleth maps on a weather satellite tracking system. He's a great guy, and we became, because of Senator Hollings, okay, we got the only other DIDS terminal in the world. Okay, that little thing right there, that PDP thing, that cost $100,000 in 1980. If you wanted to do color computer mapping stuff, that's what you had. I don't know, what's that, $500,000 now? More, maybe, right? That was neat. We had a dedicated phone line to the executive White House, executive office. It was kind of fun. And you had a user interface. So you could type in certain things. And then you could generate maps, color maps. And these are color ramps designed by rocket scientists. So they're kind of neat. Those maps, I produced those maps for Scientific American. They wanted some maps on what was going on with the 80 census. But generally speaking, in the trenches here in South Carolina, what were we involved in? And we convinced the people I'm an economic geographer, right? My dissertation work dealt with manufacturing locations. And so when I got involved here with the Economic Development Office, we created a series of layers of statewide data. And we got funded. We hired a whole bunch of students each year, and they digitized various things. We produced water and sewer line maps for the entire state. We're the only state in the country that had it. Okay? At this time, the U.S. Geological Survey had things called digital line graphs. So we had street maps, digital street maps, which we could use to build these layers. We were the only place in the country doing anything like that. And you can see the little examples over there of the economic development. So we could go any place in the state, find out whether you had water, sewer, rail, size of your output. Now, I won't say this, and I don't take credit for this, but there are people who say that the system that we established was instrumental in recruiting BMW. I don't say that, but there are people who will claim. Because, I will make this argument, BMW was looking for a site, and they found out that South Carolina was not a backwater. Right? We were able to show them existing industrial sites and the capabilities and infrastructure we were having. So, there are people who say. The map on the bottom left over here is parcel level data for Columbia, South Carolina. That's the value of the parcels. I like parcel data, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Over on the right, when I retired from the university, I worked a couple of years with the facilities people, and we developed a room-based GIS. We could take the AutoCAD drawings of all of the buildings, the floor plans, and then convert those into individual rooms. See the map on the left? Those are individual rooms. This is just out there in Pickens and Green, right? And then on the right, we did a light inventory, and we generated illumination surfaces. That was fun. Kevin, we had fun doing this.
That was good, yep.
But, you know, that was kind of fun. But then, I don't know, they lost interest.
Yeah, things happen.
Things happened. But I had fun because we were doing some novel things. I'm going to get back to that in a moment. One of the things that I will say is that our department really led the country. I would say there was no place else in the country you could go and do GIS and remote sensing. Okay, and you know, we think of those things sometimes as one and the same, but they're not. Okay, and they certainly weren't at the time we were talking about it. So working, you know, it was wonderful to be able to recruit John Jensen to the department, and together, you know, I don't know, John supervised 100 students, and I had 70 or so. So we put a lot of students through the program, and they learned a lot of things. So really forging that relationship, and we had very close relationships with the people at Savannah Riverside. This is the cover of Photogrammetric Engineering. We showed for the first time that you could integrate a variety of information at Savannah Riverside, and we also made it work on Macs, Unix machines, and DOS machines. So we went over there one day, and it was pretty impressive. We generated something called Environmental Atlas. On the bottom left there, you'll see a LiDAR image. We were doing LiDAR in 2002, you know? And the map on the right is one of the first kind of cost surfaces. This was working with Norfolk Southern Railroad. What would it cost you to build a railroad spur to the tire plant? But we had a lot of commercial applications, so we were funded to form partnerships. This is kind of fun. Okay, I wrote an article in 1988, GIS versus CAD, or computer-aided design, and database management systems. What are the differences? I put a little quote in there that I think is kind of fun, and we had this debate. John and I debated. Okay, there was one guy who had said, "Is the future of remote sensing reduced to providing input to GIS activities?" Answer is yes. No debate.
John would debate.
John, we had a good talk about that. But it's interesting because John, the last book John wrote is a GIS book with his son. I became a member of the Landsat Advisory Committee, so it was kind of an interesting thing. Now, imitation is the greatest form of flattery, right? I was looking for my article, my 1988 article. I was looking for it on the internet, and I found it. So verbatim, found my article, and it must be pretty good because it was still relevant in 2011. Who can say that, right? It's no longer there, and the journal isn't there. We don't know. But that was kind of fun. Now, I'm going to tell you about some recent stuff. So, after I retired, what did I do? Well, I worked for the Census Bureau. We developed, we were asked to start planning for the 2020 census. And I had a great opportunity at work. We did 6 different reports. Some of those, the one I was greatly involved with, this was early, 2012, 11 and 12, 5, 6 years ago. So we did a variety of different tasks, looking at the way they collect addresses, the way they could use mobile technology. So this really spurred me on. I had to do inventories of what was going on. So that was kind of fun. Then I spent a lot of time at the census, at a summer at the census, where I tried to convince the Census Bureau they should be using parcel data to build blocks. Some of them got it. I still think that's the great idea. And then John and I were hired by the Census Bureau to do some work on change detection. Survey what was going on in the world in change detection. Charlie Mondell is shaking his head here because he gave us, Charlie was with pictometry at the time and showed us how pictometry data, you know, aerial photography with 360-degree kind of possibility, you know, we call it the bird's eye thing, you know, when you could do that thing. That was pretty neat. So John and I had fun surveying change detection stuff for the census. So that was kind of fun. One of the things I did recently, I worked for I was hired. I know I wasn't hired because I didn't get paid a penny. So, but they asked me to help. COGO is the consortium of geospatial organizations. It's all of the organizations in our field. And so I was appointed or asked to serve with Governor Garinger from Wyoming and to evaluate the status of various layers of what we call framework data. How good a job is the federal government doing was really the question. And I did, I think, 3 of these themes. I gave the cadastral or the parcel stuff a D+. I was generous. But I don't want to go into that. But that's, you know, that I was asked to do, and I spent a lot of time with that. And thankless, actually, basically a thankless task. A couple of years ago, I was asked to write a book on STEM and GIS. So this is STEM and GIS in higher education. It's an e-book. It's free for download. It reflects 19 different universities that are doing GIS in STEM-related disciplines. So it's out there. This one I put in here just for Susan. This is her neighborhood. I was hired by District 2 to evaluate the demand for new schools and look at the trends that were taking place there. It was a lot of fun. So, you know, last year I did real GIS. You know, sat down, did work every day. So I got parcel level data for District 2. The map on the lower left shows what decade was individual property actually developed. So you could do that with parcel level data. You see the little bar chart there that shows which year or which decade were the houses actually constructed. You can see that the neighborhood built out. One of the interesting things, though, integrating parcel level data with the actual enrollment data, we could get something like this. So grade 12, okay, and I think about, you know, it went down in 2002 from 54 students, seniors in grade 12, down to just 18. Right? So that's a dramatic change in your neighborhood. And I said, that's exactly what happened to Susan. Right? Because Susan moved out there, your children went to the schools there, you now still live in this big house. Right? So that's you know, I love telling stories like that and having real data to look it up. So let's talk about some kind of personal highlights, and I'll move ahead a little quickly. As I reflected, and when you get an opportunity like this, you reflect on your career. In 1992, I got a call from Harm DeBlay, a very famous geographer. He had a session. He was on Good Morning America like once a week. He did a geography thing. He called me up one day and he said, I want to come down here with a crew from ABC and I want to talk about what you guys are doing. So, look at that, see that guy over there? I was thinking about this. I'd already been here 20 years. But that was kind of neat, Harm DeBlay, so we made Good Morning America. And it was about a 10-minute section called Map Making. And it's kind of interesting. I found the video of that the other day. And I actually found a VCR that I could put it into. So I just captured those. Those were kind of fun. I've had the opportunity to work in Washington a great deal. We created something, the National Research Council created a mapping science committee, and I was asked to be on that, the very first meeting of it. And over my career with it, which spanned 12 years or so, was chair for 6 years of it. Those are 8 reports on various issues relating to how the federal government is taking care of different types of geographical information. Some of those were really pretty good, like weaving the national map, the future of digital data. Looking back on those things, they were pretty neat. Susan and, well, a lot of us, Susan and Will Graff and John, our department sent a lot of people to Washington, and our voices have been heard over a long period of time. So I was involved. I didn't write all of those. I wrote 1 or 2 of them, or I was the chair of the committee. Other ones, I was the chair of the committee and organized other people and had to go find the money. People don't realize that. You've got to find money to do those. But that's the National Academy of Sciences established by Abraham Lincoln. So that's pretty neat. I was also asked one day, I called up and said, would you come and testify to Congress? Testifying to Congress is pretty interesting. You got your 5 minutes, right, with little buttons and things. And but the theme was geospatial information. Are we headed in the right direction, or are we lost? It was a good question. This is 2003. This is Richland County data online in 2003. Pretty good, huh? 2003, a web-based interface. There's all the building footprints, the parcels, really high-resolution imagery. Richland County was ahead of many other places because we trained the students that built their system. Now, the other question was Richland County going to share their data with the state or with the federal government? And the answer was a resounding no. So, are we on the right track, or are we lost? Was the question, and I pointed out that specific example. About 10 years ago, I was coming off as chair of the Mapping Science Committee, but we got a great interest from the Bureau of Land Management who wanted to know, can we do another inventory of national land? Should we build parcels for the nation? I showed you a good example of what parcel data how it would be used in some place like in Susan's neighborhood. Or I showed you the value of all the parcels in downtown Columbia. So I chaired the committee that wrote a report, National Land Parcel Data. Pretty neat when you sit on the lap of Albert Einstein in front of the National Academy. So I got this group of people together and we wrote that report. Made 10 recommendations endorsed by every federal agency. And what happened to it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing has happened. That's why I gave the Kogo report, I gave them a D+, because I was kind. Now, the National Geospatial Advisory Committee, which is why this talk, and Charlie was a member, and I told you a little bit of history of that. The interesting thing here, the National Geospatial Advisory Committee, which I had the opportunity to chair, is now codified. Last month, okay, the Geospatial Data Act of 2018 was passed by Congress, signed by the President, okay, and this committee is a standing committee. It's not just a voluntary thing. And I think that's, Charlie, because you and I did such good work. Now, the issue there is that it's a serious question. How should we be managing geospatial data, and should we do it more rigorously? And so this codifies that. It's in law. Yeah. So that's a big deal. This is the Changing Geospatial Landscape report that I ended up writing. That was this is some LiDAR data of ground zero. This is kind of nice. It's not often that you speak to 14,000 people, right? And so, Kevin, you were there that day. The guy shaking my hand is Jack Dangerman, the 165th wealthiest person in the United States. He and his wife, who owned the company, absolutely own it, the whole thing. They just gave $161 million to Nature Conservancy to buy a part of the coast of California. A huge part of the coast of California. So they do the right things, and As I say, we were customer number 7, 10, what was it? That was 13 years ago, I ended my career, right? So he gives me little tasks to do, and I enjoy doing those. And you see the little thing on the bottom there with students. We had a lot of fun. We used to bring, Jerry, you're still doing this, bringing students in. And so it's kind of fun. The end of this, the people here, the young lady with the glasses is the first third-generation GISer in the world. I ran her. She just graduated from the University of Oregon. She works for a nonprofit in Oregon doing GIS. And she's there with her father, a second-generation GIS guy who works for NOAA Fisheries in Seattle. He's helping develop sustainable fisheries in the Northwest Coast. The guy on the bottom of the surfboard is our grandson, who is doing, I bring this up because he's doing a degree at the University of Oregon in spatial data science. Okay, I think it's the first program in the country generating undergraduates to do that. Okay, so I take a little longer than I wanted to there, but hopefully that reflected on, I wanted to give you a feel for some of the things that we were doing and how this department made a mark. We really made a mark in the country. They came, people asked us to do things and we always delivered. I think that's really good.